loud. Okay, so welcome everyone. Welcome, Jodi. And so let's see. I wonder, will we talk more than 5 minutes about something girl before we tangent? But let's at least start there. So question for Jodi.
Oh, please, this is always such an awkward moment.
I know it is. Janice, yes, please.
Okay, so I read The Something Girl and then I went back and read The Nothing Girl and Little Donkey. And somewhere in there, Thomas says that Jenny's going to have a girl and a boy. And I don't remember a boy appearing.
In Joy to the World, he's a young, I don't think I specified how old he was, but probably preschool. And in Storm Christopher, which is just coming out, he's of either lower junior school or upper infant school. I haven't decided yet. But he and Joy go off on a school trip and leave the story, really. The story is about Russell and Jenny really looking forward to the first weekend they've had off since Joy was born. Russell obviously has all sorts of plans which involve wine and sessions in front of the fire and all sorts of things, and they're just about to pour the wine and get down to it, and the telephone rings, and I'm not going to tell you anymore.
Oh, okay, thank you. I should read more carefully yet again.
He didn't have an enormous role. I think I only referred to him in passing because in Joy to the World, I wanted the true story to be about Joy and not distracted at all.
Yeah. I think, yes, I'll read Joy to the World again then.
Carol. We can't hear you, Carol. You're not on mute, but we also can't hear you. Still nothing. You might have to re-hook up. I think she's gone. So, okay. So we can come back to Carol. JD, I see a hand up.
Hello, is that me?
Yeah, that's you.
Hello.
I'm glad. Well, no, I'm not glad that someone else is having the problem. But last month that was me waving.
It was you, wasn't it?
I would say deja vu for you. You're like, wait.
It's just very, very frustrating, isn't it?
Yeah.
I joined this meeting at a time where we were apparently all showing each other our socks. So I don't know whether that's a thing that I missed or.
Yes, we're forming a secret society, and unless you are wearing bizarre and unmatching socks, you cannot join. And they were forcing me to display my credentials in public.
That's outrageous. I only ever buy black socks because then all of my socks match, or all of them are odd, depending on which.
Well, I'm sorry, you're out then. Leave the screen immediately.
I've got Schrodinger's socks, but I always have mismatched underwear, so I hope that counts.
It goes some way towards it, yes.
Cool. I did the reading for this month, and then completely decided that I hadn't read any of the Elizabeth Cage stuff. So I've gone on and read all of that, and completely forgotten about the Nowhere Girl. But I've had a lovely time.
I wouldn't worry about it. We normally spend a nominal 15 to 20 seconds discussing the book, and then it branches out in all directions.
Well, on the subject of branching out, the thing that I wanted to say last month, and I wrote it on my desk, and it's been here for a month, was I got sidetracked into, I think it was George Orwell's essay on tea, and then discovered that Douglas Adams had written one, again about tea. And I thought, since everyone that we know from Rushford and beyond has such a strong opinion on tea, coffee, and food in general, have you considered doing a cookbook?
Did anybody get that? I got as far as, have I ever considered?
Well, that's a
And then
good point to drop out, isn't it? Has anyone have you considered doing a cookbook? Because you've got canteens, you've got farmhouses, you've got people who can cook, people who can't cook. I think that would be interesting.
there is a cookbook called I think it's something along the lines of a guide and proper feeding to historians, or just another cookbook or something. I'm sorry, I can't remember. But there is, if you go on Amazon, it is on Amazon, and all
I should,
proceeds go to charity. And
well,
I
I should
wrote a
completely have a look.
foreword. Yeah,
I'll put
it's
the
my
link in the
special
chat.
leek and potato soup.
Thank you.
Oh, there it is. Look.
That's fantastic. See, great
Yes.
minds think alike. That's brilliant. Is it leek and potato
I
or
can't
potato
see
and
the
leek?
title. Can we see it again, please?
Yeah, and the rest is cookery.
That's it.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a brilliant
All right.
title.
Yeah,
Oh,
and
well,
it's,
fantastic.
yeah, it's quite a
Yes,
fantastic
and
cookbook.
they sent me samples and specimens because there's all sorts of recipes in there, and every single one was absolutely delicious. So hugely recommended.
I'm going to go on Amazon now and buy it. That's fantastic. Right. Well, that's me happy. Other than the socks, I shall go and amend that immediately.
Yeah,
Thank
I
you.
feel you need to review your sock policy.
Yeah. It is less problematic though, because again, when I get a hole in one, I just throw one sock away.
When I was at school, we had to wear black knitted stockings, and it was detention if you got a hole in them. So I used to dip my finger in the inkwell. Does anybody remember inkwells, you know, before magic markers and felt tip pens and everything, and then fill in the hole with my finger? But of course they were knitted stockings, and they fell down throughout the day, especially if they got wet. They got heavier and heavier, and when I undressed at night, I used to have a series of black circles all the way down my legs, marking the progress of my stockings that day. I just tossed that in for what it's worth.
That sounds exciting. Has anyone got an option to buy this book for less than 35 quid?
Is that on Amazon?
Yeah. Wow.
Is that paperback or Kindle?
Paperback.
I just had a look on the website, Jodie, and I can't see it on your website. I might have missed it, but I just had a quick. There's a link to it there. I can see the signed copy.
It's print to order normally on Amazon. So
I'm sorry, I'm realizing I'm using this as my personal shopping network. So I should be quiet and give someone else a go. But it's lovely to talk to you finally this month. So
Lovely to
thank
speak
you.
to you again as well.
So we do have, I'm going to try to do some of the questions that are in the chat before they build up too much. So question is about your glasses. Are they from Ronit First? Because they are lovely. And there was a curiosity as to where your glasses are from. And they are lovely. We love them. Ever since we got them, they're fantastic.
Prue Leith glasses. I don't know if anybody watches the Great British Bake Off, and she wears very colourful glasses every week, something different. And I've been after some for ages, and Specsavers don't do them. In fact, the 12-year-old who served me didn't even know who Prue Leith was. And then I was wandering around Marlborough one day, more or less minding my own business, and there is an optician in the high street, and he does the full range of Prue Leith spectacles. So I dashed in, grabbed these, because I couldn't stay, didn't have my eyes tested or anything, brought them back to where I live, went to see Specsavers, and they said, no, they were sorry, they couldn't put my lenses in for me. Not because they were being nasty or anything, but because they weren't their glasses. Right. If they broke them, putting the lenses in, they wouldn't be able to replace them. So at this point, I should say I shot down the high street to Vision Express, who said exactly the same thing, but they were willing to give it a go. So I left them with Vision Express, and 3 days later, went back to collect them. The entire shop was waiting for me so that they could see what they look like. And I've had loads and loads of compliments on them. I'm just the person who wears them, sadly.
Well, they are awesome. I mean, they are beautiful. So
the range is stunning. So if anybody's interested, it's worth checking out independent opticians near you to see if you can get them.
yeah, I'll have to see if I can get them in the US. So
Yes.
So, okay, the next question is, so Carol, because she couldn't reconnect on audio, her question is, did you just lean on the keyboard when writing the meeting between Cockburn and Marilyn?
Could you just repeat the last bit of the question, please?
So did you just lean on the keyboard when writing the meeting between Cockburn and Marilyn?
No. I didn't, obviously. I might have pounded it at random, but I do that quite a lot anyway. I just donkeys don't say hee haw. It's variations on hee haw, and if you listen quite carefully, there is every vowel sound known to man in there, and then that's all on the huge exhale, and then there's a dramatic pause, and then they inhale, and you get a completely different set of sounds as well. And this was what I was trying to convey through my author skill in the book, only to find that everybody thinks I just leaned on the keyboard.
And Allie, who's showing up as usual because she's at work, so we don't know that. But Allie wants to know if you ever had an imaginary friend like Thomas.
No, actually, this is going to sound quite bizarre, but I think I was the imaginary friend. I did it the other way around. I would watch television programs as a child, and instead of taking a character from there, I would insert myself into the television program, where I immediately, of course, became the most important character and the one that saved the day. So by the age of about 5.5, I was a well-seasoned superhero who'd done all sorts of things. But no, I didn't have an imaginary friend. I rather think I might have done it the other way around, actually. What that says about me psychologically, I don't know, and possibly we needn't discuss it here.
And okay, back to the screen. Sarah, you've had your hand up for eon, so please.
Okay, so strange as it may sound, dragging us back to George Orwell, I couldn't help but wonder whether Boxer, the incredibly flighty thoroughbred, was named after Boxer, the incredibly stolid and sensible horse in Animal Farm.
No, he wasn't. The name Boxer just came to me. But when I was young and fit and used to ride a lot, there was an enormous horse. I think his name was Storm, actually. And he was a failed racehorse. He was a beautiful looking horse, but he wasn't terrified of everything, but he was extremely highly strung. And I just exaggerated that for Boxer, who is terrified of everything from leaves upwards, because I just thought it was a nice trick. Racehorses are, I believe, extremely highly strung at the best of times.
Yes.
And Boxer's not bright, poor lamb.
Yeah, no, I have to agree with that. Racehorses are their own special neuroses. So.
Yes, and I think they lead such pampered lives, as long as they're earning, of course, that the real world sometimes comes as a little bit of a shock to them. You know, they have beautiful stables, heated, and loads of attendants and the best of everything, and then they step out of their stable and it's windy and it's raining, and they're not impressed.
So true. And they freak out at absolutely anything.
Yes, a paper bag is a monster.
Yes, yeah. Or a barrel sitting outside a ring where it's not supposed to be.
Or even something that they've walked past 10 times a day every day of their entire lives, and suddenly it morphs into something terrifying and they won't walk past it.
Take the same jump that they've jumped over, disassemble it, take the standards and lay them along the side of the rail, and suddenly it's become a monster.
Yes.
So so Christine, you have a question.
I want to take us back to tea, because when we were discussing tea, I had this incredible image of Markham wearing Georgian tea smuggling underpants to get tea to Matthew in the Time Police.
It's indeed a very interesting idea, but I'd like a show of hands here. Would anybody here consider drinking tea that had been in Markham's underpants? Answer honestly, please.
You could pick where you got them from. I'd have them from round the knees.
What are his underpants doing round his knees?
Because they're Georgian, they're not modern.
Oh, okay. So when I talk to Hazel tomorrow and she says, how did the meeting go? And I have to tell her.
Yeah. Can you record it? Can you record it and put it on Facebook, please?
This is being recorded. So so far for Hazel, you have, well, I had to show them my socks, and then we talked about Markham having tea in his underwear.
Well, actually, I was going to say that I was told to strip, because that actually sounds much more interesting than taking your socks off.
Okay, so along those lines, sort of, Carol has another question of, do you find writing sex scenes easier than death scenes?
Death scenes come to me really, really naturally. If I'm not careful, every scene turns into a death scene. I have to be quite firm with myself sometimes. Sex scenes, it depends. Sometimes I approach from a strange angle and it turns out to be funny. And a friend of mine actually recommended, who does write quite a lot of sex scenes, actually recommended that I drink the better part of a bottle of wine before sitting down and writing a sex scene. And I did once have half a glass, and I couldn't see the screen properly, so that didn't turn out to be such a good idea after all. If I had to choose, I'd go with the death scene, obviously, because they're much more interesting. So yeah, I do find death scenes easier than sex scenes. Again, if you've drawn any psychological conclusions, please keep them to yourself at the moment.
Okay, and there's a message from Lisa, whose camera isn't working. So, hello, Jodi and company. This is my first meeting and my phone camera isn't working since it fell down the toilet. So Lisa, you fit in really well here. So anyway, Jodi, I recently visited Rome and the Forum, and I had recently read Max's trip to witness Caesar's death. So it was so interesting. Do you visit locations before you write about them?
Well, for a long time, I lived in Turkey. So visiting locations wasn't really an option. And then I moved back to this country. And visiting places became even less of an option, really, especially since we had lockdown. I'm sure I've told this story before. The only location really that I set out deliberately and intentionally was Doward, the site of Arthur's battle. And my brother took me, drove me there. I was armed with notebook and pens, and we parked on the wrong side of the hill, completely unknowingly. And it was like the north face of the Eiger, and it took us nearly 2 hours to get to the top, and it was so steep. We actually had to hang on to tree branches and grass and things to stop falling backwards. When 2 hours later, red-faced, breathless, and both of us fibrillating like maniacs, we eventually got to the top. There was the Iron Age fort all spread out in front of me, which was what I'd gone to see. But sadly, there was also a very, very, very small cow about 8 miles away on the horizon. This cow was the size of a dachshund, and it wasn't one of those big black and white Friesians either. It was a little French creamy Charolais. But unfortunately, my brother is very cow averse. And he took one look at this cow that was so far away, it practically had its own postcode, and legged it. And normally I would have let him go, but he had the car keys. So I had to fly back down the hill after him, just to caught him up just in time as he was barricading himself inside the car, preparing presumably for future cow attacks. This is a story I love to tell every Christmas lunch as we're all sitting around the table. And he retaliates by sending me clippings about people who've been menaced by cows over the year. And there's usually 3 or 4 of them. And I am told that they can be quite nasty. But, you know, if there's such a thing as a small friendly cow, that was it. So, yes, I did visit Doward, and I also visited Raglan Castle for the steam pump jump, where he and I argued violently, quite violently, over where the site of the steam pump was. We both got it wrong, incidentally, but we became very vigorous in our opinions and loud, and people actually moved away from us. So there's another place we can never go back to. So yes, while visiting sites is very commendable, it doesn't always go quite as well as you think it might.
That's awesome. So okay, so Clarence wants to know, what is your favorite genre to read? And I would guess it goes all over the place based on when you stuff that's posted on the Facebook page.
Yeah, it does actually. I don't read a lot of science fiction any longer, because I always think I worry about absorbing somebody else's ideas, or worse, I'm halfway through a book and I suddenly discover, reading somebody else's book, that storyline already exists. So I have cut back a lot on science fiction. But basically, if it's a good story, I'll read anything. I've just finished Lexi Coningham's latest book, The Face of the Sea Stack, which was excellent. And I've got Lindsay Davis's latest book now. So I'm historical at the moment. But I'm also fighting my way through the Story of Philosophy by Brian McKee, which fortunately is beautifully illustrated, which I find very helpful, actually, because it's quite a meaty subject.
Deb, you have a question.
Hi, yeah, sorry, Jodie, just because you mentioned Lindsay Davis, and on the bookshelf behind me is the entire Falco series, basically. I just wondered if you preferred the Falco side or his daughter's sort of story kind of sections. I'm a Falco girl, but I think that's because I got to him first. So
I read Falco first, like most people would have, I think. Yeah. The first 2 or 3 of Flavia Albia I really enjoyed. And then she got married, and
yeah,
she lost a little bit of her fire, I think. But that's just a personal thing. The writing and the stories are as excellent as ever. I just find that she's calmed down a little bit. Whether it's because she married or not, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see in which direction Lindsay Davis takes her, I think, now that she's a young matron rather than a footloose and fancy-free investigator. So it'll be interesting.
Did you read her sort of standalone story, The Course of Honor, which is the whole Vespasian?
I read the one about Vespasian and his mistress.
Yes, that's the one.
Yes, that's the only standalone book that I've read so far.
Yeah, I think that is actually possibly my favourite book of hers, even though I love the whole Falco kind of story, just because maybe it's because it's from the female protagonist view, or it's the backstory of a character that plays a big role in a lot of our other stories, but you see it from the domestic side and the prequel, I suppose. But yeah, but no,
Yeah.
brilliant. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Yeah. And there's a little note from Catherine, not something girl related, which is fine because, as Jodi mentioned, we stay on topic for all of 5 minutes. But Catherine wanted to say that she has secured a place at Birmingham City University as a very mature student to study English and creative writing, thanks to an essay that she wrote comparing and contrasting Madeline Maxwell and Thursday Next. So thanks to you and Jasper. That's
Oh, wow.
awesome.
If he comes to Jodi World next year, we must tell him that. He'll be thrilled, I'm sure. And I'm absolutely thrilled.
Yeah, congratulations, Catherine. That is fantastic.
Yes. Well done.
Yeah. And Lisa, again, whose camera's not working, said that she would like a whole story about cows. So
Yes, yes. My long-suffering editor, when I ring her up and say, Frankie, I have 30,000 words about cows for you. I shall blame Lisa.
that's right. The entire story about cows.
Yeah.
So other questions from people? So I know coming up soon is the co-interview with Kiev.
Oh, yes.
Right, which I am personally very excited about. I mean, to hear both of you will be just brilliant. I am curious of how that came about. I mean, I've seen you both on your respective pages, like fangirling, fanboying each other. So to see, it's he always just writes. Every time one of your book comes out, he's all over it. So
no, it was me. I lost all dignity. You'll be astonished to hear. I read The Stranger Times, and firstly I was consumed with envy that I hadn't written this brilliant book, and I enjoyed it so much that I actually I don't normally do reviews, and I especially don't do reviews if I don't like the book. I simply don't have the time to sit down and read. But I enjoyed it so much that I whopped up a review on Amazon, just a quick one to say how much I'd enjoyed it. And about a day later, I got an email saying, "Are you the Jodi Taylor?" And I was in 2 minds as to whether to answer it or not, because he might have been referring to the other Jodi Taylor, for all I knew, and saying, "Yes, I am the Jodi Taylor," could lead to all sorts of unpleasantness. So I bet very cautiously. Well, I typed very cautiously, "Yes, I am." And he said, "Oh, I really enjoy your books." I was staggered to find that he read them. And he asked if he could use part of my review as strapline for his books. And I said, yes, of course. And then when my next one came out, he reviewed it. And we've sort of gone, he sends me every time he has a new book out, he sends me an art copy, and I do the same for him. And then somebody, and I can't remember who, said, "Wouldn't it be great if you could meet and chat?" So we are meeting and chatting on Wednesday, and I believe people have contributed questions as well. Hazel will be, she calls it mediating, which is a little bit worrying. Trying to keep order probably, and we'll just have a chat, and then she'll edit it down so that we look reasonably intelligent. Well, I look reasonably intelligent, and put it up somewhere for people to enjoy. And I'm also a big fan of Lexi Coningham's work as well. She's got a new one out, which I've just finished, and we've been messaging each other for ages, talking about our books and things. And I've asked her if I sent her a list of written questions, whether she'd be kind enough to answer them. And she was kind enough to say that she would be delighted. So I'll get some questions together and send them off to her. And then we should be able to post some Q&A sessions with Lexi Coningham. It'll be written, not like this.
Right.
But I think people will be interested because I suspect the two of us have many readers in common.
Yeah, I think so. I think both of those will be really well received.
Yes.
And I think your readers will be thrilled over both of those. So
I hope so, yes. And for me as well, because writing is very lonely. You know, I sit here at my desk day in, day out, thinking, is this book any good? Is this the book where everybody discovers that I really can't write? Am I wasting my time? Should I go out and get a proper job? You know, the usual thing. And to be able to talk to another writer about exactly the same thing and discover that they have exactly the same anxieties and worries is actually quite reassuring, if that makes sense.
yeah, no, that makes good sense. And I'll say from my perspective, you know, every once in a while, I come across an author where I'm just like, oh my gosh, this is like so new, so original, just sucks me in. And that's how I felt when I discovered your books. And then I also felt that way when when I read Stranger Times. And so, yeah, so I can see the sort of that synergy there of perspective. You're both incredibly prolific, incredibly creative. And your writing is hysterically funny on both sides, serious and funny. So, so I think I'm looking forward to that. And I think the quick Q&A with Lexi will also be just amazing. So
I hope so, yes.
Carol's additional question. Did you want to be a redhead? As Max is a redhead, as is Bitch Face Barkley, and Francesca, Don't Call Me Franny Kingdom are also redheads.
Yes, and Small Hope's a redhead too. There are redheads in my family. I sadly am boring blonde, and we don't have half as much fun as Marilyn Monroe would have you believe. But it came about because when I was in Turkey, and these dreadful stories kept coming up on my feed about young girls who were being picked on because they were redheads. And there was a really sad story about a little girl. I think she was about 6, and she asked her mum if she could dye her hair brown because she was being teased and bullied at school because she was redhead. And there was a picture of her in clothes, and she had the most glorious red hair. And I thought, oh, poor little soul. So I made Max a redhead. And of course, this is me. Once I start, I can't stop. So just about everybody, apart from Dr. Bairstow, doesn't have any hair. Most of my heroines, and Russell as well, have got red hair. So I'm sorry about that. Possibly a slight touch of overcompensation there.
Thanks. You. Okay, additional questions. Surely, I know there's got to be more questions out there, or I can just keep talking. So, yeah, normally I'm hosting Zoom things with clients in Japan, and then I make some like joke or whatever, and then it just goes over, just doesn't translate well, and I just get met by these polite stares from a Japanese audience. So so this is a little more friendly. So Felix says, I've enjoyed reading the Alexander Walsh Marcus House series. Time jump, not moving in time, but an interesting idea. The stories of Henry VIII's later wives told from their perspective, but is history what we were told? So that's another recommendation in the chat line. The chat is kind of going off on book recommendations now. So, oh, Deb, you do have another question.
Yeah, sorry, just obviously we've been talking about a little bit about Nothing Else, Something Else, Storm Christopher, and I know there's quite a few regular people on this call, and there's some people who haven't been on before. So I was just wondering if Jodi could give us an outline of the amazing amount of books she's basically going to be giving us in the next year, so people won't start bullying her for the next thing and the next thing and the next thing. Because I know there's quite a few coming our way, including Small Hope and Pennyroyal, which I'm ridiculously excited about. So
yes, well, I'll start with that one then, if you like. I'm in the middle of the copy edits now. There are bits of paper everywhere, and my trusty notebook. I'm about halfway through. That's the final stage, and that will give us the final copy, which then Zara can use to record. So that will be happening soon as well. I have seen the cover. It requires a few minor tweaks, but it's a very striking cover, completely different to anything that's gone before, because it's a completely different series. So that's Small Hope and Pennyroyal all well in hand. Storm Christopher is out. Is it later this month? They tell me these things and I do listen, but you know, nothing stays in there for very long. But I think it's later this month. And that's a short story from the Frogmorton Farm series. Russell's in it, Jenny, Franny, who's got herself into a little bit of a tangle, Police Sergeant Bates, obviously, and Storm Christopher. So that's this month. And then in June, I think it is, again, they've told me the date, and again, I've completely failed to retain it, is Killing Time, which is the latest Time Police one. They are chasing a ghost train through town, through time, sorry. A couple of members of Team 236 are trapped on board and can't get off. Yeah, that's the same story seen from lots of different points of view as well. And Jane and Grint take another step forward in their relationship. I'm not saying any more about that. Right, going on to next year, I am putting the finishing touches to Bad Moon, which is the next Elizabeth Cage book. I need to do a bit of serious editing on that and then polishing, and then that will get sent off. And I have notes for the next Time Police book, which will be called Out of Time. And I do know what it's all about. And my problem with this one is that I'm inundated with ideas, and I'm going to have to go through and be fairly firm with myself, I'm afraid. And then there are murmurings about another Small Hope and Pennyroyal book. And I'm also just putting the finishing touches to the Christmas story this year, which is called Lights, Camera, Mayhem, because Calvin Cutter is back at St. Mary's. Is that enough for you?
Yeah, I think it could be. Well, to be honest, of course, it's never enough. So, I mean, we are just like great vampire parasites who just want to keep soaking up what you write. So
I have, that's a marvelous description, actually. I must remember that. Vampire parasites. Yeah.
That could be a t-shirt. Ask Jodi Taylor about her vampire parasites, in brackets, very adoring fans, close brackets.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So
yes. Or you could have t-shirts. I am a vampire parasite. Wear that up and down the high street.
DM VP on the bracket. Ask me about Jodi Taylor.
So we'll make it sound better. It'll be I am a literary vampire parasite. So yeah.
I feel that lessens the impact somewhat. I'd go for full on in your face vampire parasite if I were you.
Okay, we could do that. I'm going to show up at the next. I'll show up at Bosworth.
Yes.
Wearing that.
I feel we've taken the first steps with our unmatching socks.
So yeah, and yeah, I'll show up there with that as well. So Janelle, you had a question.
Sorry, I was trying to unmute, but
yeah,
yes, another vampire parasite here. So I'm very excited to hear all the things you were just saying. I do want to go back to the discussion about writing death scenes and sex scenes. I appreciate the fact that you don't go into a lot of detail with the sex scenes, because, you know, the more that's left to the imagination, I think the better. But I was also thinking about some scenes that I tend to have very strong reaction to that are not technically death scenes. But when the donkey and his former owner get a chance to say goodbye, I was crying, you know, the tears were just ridiculous.
Well, I don't want to sound unkind or cruel, but your words are warming an author's heart, because that's to know that you've written a scene that moves somebody is very gratifying. So thank you very much. I don't know if you mean it that way or not, but I'm taking it as a huge compliment. Thank you.
I absolutely mean it as a compliment. And
thank you very much.
Well, and the scenes when Matthew is taken by Ronan, and every time I read the line, he lifted his little arms or he raised his, I get buckets, just buckets. And even talking about it right now, I'm tearing up a little bit. Because, well, and you know, I have children and now I have grandchildren, and they're 3 and under. So just the very thought of something like that happening.
I thought it would be difficult to write, actually. And I approached it with some reluctance. I skipped around it and carried on with the aftermath, and then came back to it. So it wasn't written in a linear fashion. And I sat down one day and thought, no, I have to do this. And I started to go through the scene up in sickbay with Helen. And I think I wrote for 5 or 6 hours. I just wrote the whole thing from Ronan's appearance through, I won't go into detail in case anybody hasn't read it, but through what happened in sickbay, and then what Max did afterwards, and how she raced around the hall hurting herself and just unable to think coherently or do anything useful, really, and how they had to calm her down. And that took about 5 or 6 hours to write. And I wrote it all in one solid block, and then went back and read it. And apart from changing a word or two or doing something about my scattergun approach to commas, it pretty much wrote itself. I was exhausted at the end of it. And I have had people say to me, it's one of the most moving things that they've ever read. And indeed, somebody who had just had a baby said she was unable to read it, although she hopes to get back to it one day, which wasn't my intention at all. But again, I take it as a compliment. So thank you very, very much.
Well, and it is totally moving. And when you're around little children, of course, one of the most gratifying things they can do is to raise their arms for you to lift them. And so, yes, it just was ripping every time to hit that line. And I have referred my son-in-law, and he has started reading the books, and he hasn't gotten to that part. And my granddaughter is not quite 2 years old, and I'm a little worried about him when the time comes. But fabulous writing, you know, very effective and very appreciated.
I think it's every parent's worst nightmare, isn't it?
Yeah.
It is the worst thing that can happen to anyone, grandparent, parent, aunt, uncle, even siblings. It's just everybody's nightmare come true. Yeah, it wasn't easy to write, but once I got into it, and I remember thinking as I was writing it, I'm not sure my editor is going to let me keep this in. And when the edits came back, I went straight to that particular section. And there was, she'd barely touched it actually, and there was just a little note at the bottom which sort of said, wow, this is quite good, which was good for her. That was high praise at the time. So yeah, I was quite moved myself when I wrote it, actually. We should probably move on because I'm making a bit of an ass of myself here.
No, I understand, but I just wanted
you
to express how much it was appreciated.
Thank you. That's very kind of you.
And I can imagine that it would have been exhausting afterwards to have, because obviously that came out of you and it just, completely exhausting.
Yes, one big bucket full, actually.
Yeah.
The other one that I did almost in one go was Max's adventures in the 14th century when she met William Hendred. I knew exactly where I wanted to go with that, and I just sat down and kept at it until it was all done. And it does happen occasionally. It's happened with Small Hope and Pennyroyal. I knew exactly what I wanted to say. I knew where I wanted to go. And I just held the pen and the words fell out all on their own. It does happen occasionally.
Yeah, I felt that way reading when Thomas said was saying goodbye to Jenny for when he's when he's like, I have to go off. And I mean, it was just gut wrenching. That goodbye was just, I was sobbing during that.
Lucy Price Lewis, who reads the books, sent me a lovely email after she'd narrated The Nothing Girl, to say that she had been so upset when Thomas said goodbye that her producer had actually shut the microphone down and said, we have to stop. And they'd had to go off and have a cup of tea and pull themselves together so that she could come back and finish reading. And I often wonder, and if I ever meet Zara Ram again, because we have lunch occasionally, I must ask her if there are any passages that, not necessarily in my books, but any books that are really moving for a narrator to read, because you can't actually break down and start sobbing as you're narrating somebody else's book, can you? You have to convey the emotion behind the words without actually experiencing the emotion behind the words. Yeah, that's a good question. I shall ask her that next time I see her.
Yeah. John, you've had your hand up for ages.
I just wanted to agree. The line, and she never saw her baby again, hit like a breeze block. And Max's next sort of period where she's walking around was the most real thing I've ever read, and I accept it must have been hard to write. It was hard to read, but in a really good way. But for me, some of the most moving things, I said to you before about you being bad for my health. I drive while I'm listening to these books. And my God, woman, you almost killed me. You moved me onto the pavement almost when the line, what was it? Cage, you smell like a bonfire drenched in Chanel. Do you laugh out loud when something like that comes to you? Because it almost put me off the road.
No, I don't actually. I usually, when I'm writing dialogue, I'm careering from one voice to the next so as not to lose momentum. It's got to keep going. If I sit and have to think about what he's going to say and then what she's going to say and then what he's going to say, I kind of lose it a bit. So I just keep writing. Sometimes when I go back at the end of the day and read what I've written, I have a bit of a grin sometimes, and I think, oh yeah, my readers will like that.
I'm glad you can enjoy it as well.
Oh, my readers won't like that because I'm naughty. But yes, I do.
I'm really glad you get to enjoy it as well, because there have been times, particularly with the Elizabeth Cage books, where I have just snorted in a really most unattractive way.
Yeah, there is no good way to snort. I wouldn't worry too much about it.
No, but it is the sweet and the sour, because like I say, you drop some breeze blocks on people, and that instance of Max wandering around was very recognizable, because I think we've all, to one degree or another, been in that kind of pain, and it was just very, very real.
There was an incident at Cardiff Comic Con, actually, in the beginning years when Hazel and I were setting out on this big adventure. And I think I'd written book 3 or 4, but it was book 2, Jack the Ripper. And we were outside the gents' toilets, because that's where they put our bookstall. So we're all laid out, all the books are all laid out and everything's beautiful. And we're right outside the gents' toilets, which was quite interesting sometimes. And one of the management team for Cardiff Comic came racing up and said, there's somebody who's come to see you. Have you got a chair? Because she's disabled and she's, very tired. And we said yes, and found a chair from somewhere, and turned up a lovely gentleman and his wife. And we put the chair out for her, but it wasn't for her, it was for him. And he was an enormous, very burly lorry driver. And he took one look at me and burst into floods of tears. And I've never actually had that happen before. I've had people recoil in horror, but never actually burst into tears on the spot. So we sat him down and sort of said, what is the problem? And he was talking about the scene that I'd written when Max and Cal are trapped in the pod with Jack the Ripper. And Dr. Bairstow's talking to them, and he can't let them out. There's no way that he can open the door and let this thing out into the world. And Leon's talking to her about it afterwards. And he says to her, Dr. Bairstow was with you the whole time, and he would never have left you, and he would have sat there and watched you die, because that was his duty. And this lorry driver said, I read that, he said, and it was just so, and off he went again, tears pouring down his cheeks. So we got him a cup of tea and just generally cheered him up a little bit. But he found that scene to be enormously moving. And it's interesting talking to people. Different people are moved by different scenes, which is very interesting, actually. But he was a lovely man, and we cheered him up, and I signed a book for him. And hopefully he went home happier than he'd set out.
You move people, but just if you could avoid moving me onto the pavement, that would be good.
I'll tone it down a bit. As I'm writing, I will think, I don't want John up on the pavement when he's reading this.
Yeah, but actually I'm fine. It's fine.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Deb just noted a second slogan on top of Vampire Parasites, that Jodi Taylor makes truckers cry. That could definitely go on a t-shirt.
Yeah, okay. But he was such a nice man.
Fire truckers cry. That's what the t-shirt's going to say. Sorry, I corrected myself.
Cheryl, you have a question?
Just a comment, because and she's already talked about it. The scenes that really touched me are the quiet ones. In fact, I was trying to remember it in the 14th century when she went back and talked to him while he was dying. I just was crying. And, I've had to sit with people as they died. And again, the Jack the Ripper one was very hard for me to read. That's why you really touch people, Jodi. You have a talent, which is just amazing. I think
that's very kind of you. Thank you very much indeed. I just write the scene as it unfolds inside my head, really.
It's amazing.
I worry about the inside of my head sometimes. And Hazel says I'm not to mention the voices.
Well, no, I like the voices. Everybody has a voice, I think. I mean, I've had one for years. So you have to listen to them. And you obviously do. And you're putting it down on paper for everyone to enjoy.
for some reason, I never really listen to the voice that says, you really shouldn't be doing this. That one, I don't take any notice of at all.
And we're
I
very
would
grateful.
say, though, I read articles about writing books and how not to expect success, and it was difficult and you couldn't break into the market and all sorts of things. And as I was writing, a little voice at the back of my mind was saying, you know, this really isn't a good idea. You're supposed to be retired or go off and get a proper job. And I very, very nearly, I applied for and got a job as a PA to the principal of a college somewhere. And for a whole day, I thought, oh, I should let this go, you know, and take this job, financial security, respectability, etc., etc. And I didn't. And I'm very big on financial security, so I really don't know why I didn't. So maybe a little voice was telling me, don't give up the writing for the day job.
Well,
so
I personally am very thankful you keep writing.
I didn't take the day job. I went with the writing.
But I am waiting. I have a question on the good, the bad, and the history. And so when are we going to read that? I don't want to ruin it for anyone who hasn't read it yet.
I don't know. We haven't read much St. Mary's, have we? We read.
No, we haven't. We need to go with St. Mary's, yes.
And then we went wandering off, you know, much like these meetings, actually. We'll have to decide at the end of the meeting what you all want to read next.
Yeah. Okay, so we have a few minutes left. Heather, you have a question as you sit in the airport.
Thanks, Jodi. Got a quick question. I don't know if you can hear this or not.
I can.
Do narrators read the book first, or do they narrate the books blind?
I believe Zara reads them first, because she always says it's quite embarrassing to give somebody a Scottish accent all the way through, only to discover on the last page that they're French, or words to that effect. I did get into trouble over Evans not being Welsh, because he was in about 3 or 4 books before I decided that he came from Halifax. And she frowned at me over that one, saying she had about 3 paragraphs to ease him out of the Welsh accent and into a Yorkshire accent. So yes, I think she goes through first and highlights bits and pieces and makes notes about characters. I think it makes sense to read the book first. You would need to have a sense of what you were talking about. So she goes through, decides on the characters, allocates accents and things, and then lets rip. I have actually read one of my own books. I read the very first damn thing. It's incredibly hard work. Your tongue just goes numb after a while. You can't see the print. They keep making you go back because you've spluttered into the microphone or whatever. It was incredibly hard work. I was nearly dead at the end of it. And the thought of doing that, you know, on a regular basis, I found quite daunting, actually. So yeah, kudos to all narrators.
Yeah, my sister-in-law actually does narration on books, and she says it's hard. I mean, it took her quite a long time to break into it. She's an actor, and then she started doing narration. She's done, I guess, you know, she's got a few books that she's got on Audible that she's done, but it took her a long time to actually break into that as a field, because it's a whole
and you have to you have to concentrate the whole time, because if your mind wanders, as mine does, it's reflected in your voice, and you lose impact, and you're just somebody who's reading something in front of you, whereas actually you're narrating it, which is slightly different. So yeah, as I say, kudos to all narrators.
Yeah. All right, Janice, last question.
Sorry, it wasn't a question. It was that we were glad you haven't given up the day job, Jodi. I've spent the last year caring for my dad and my husband, who has Alzheimer's. Dad's just decided to be in a care home, but amazingly, you were my safe space. When life was too hard, I disappeared to St. Mary's. Thank you.
you know, people say this. We all have bad times in our lives, and I've had one or two bad times, and I've got through with books. When I was younger, Georgette Heyer was a huge comfort to me because everything always ended happily and everything was fine. And it got me through some very dark times. And now, actually, for me to have people say to me, "You've done the same for me," I feel as if I'm paying something back. And it's enormously gratifying at the same time. So you're very welcome. And I'm just so happy that something I did has been of such importance in somebody else's life. It's very difficult for me to believe, but there we go. So thank you very much.
Thanks. And I think that's an awesome note to end this read along with. But so next month, May 5th, May 12th, Jodi, do you have a preference?
Hold on a moment. I will consult my diary. And I hope everybody's really impressed. That I could find it. May the 5th. Yep, I can do May the 5th.
Okay.
I can do May the 12th as well. So you decide. Should we go for the 5th?
Yeah, we could do the 5th. I think that works well.
Okay.
And I will talk to, do you have a preference for which book we do, or you want me to, I can chat with Karen about it and we can then chat with you?
I don't have anything at all. Whatever anybody else wants to do, I will happily fall in with that. I think probably I'm inclining towards the St. Mary's book.
Yeah,
because we haven't had one for a long time.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking too. That, and you know, we might want to do Time Police in June. So I'm thinking maybe let's do St. Mary's in May.
Okay.
So awesome. So thank you all for joining the call, and we will see everybody in May, and I'm going to stop the recording.